All right. Welcome, everyone. We'll just give a minute for folks to get settled. I think we have a couple more in the lobby. Great. All right. We'll kick off, and Stuart, if you can keep admitting people if they're in our lobby, that would be great. Thanks everybody for joining me today. It's a great turnout. I really appreciate everybody making some time, and I'm happy, happy you all could be here. I received a lot of questions in advance, which I hope I'll be speaking to and addressing as we go. And if there are additional questions, please throw them in the chat, and we'll have lots of time at the end. And if there's anything I didn't cover or things that questions that are prompted as we go, hopefully we can have some time and address those, as I said, at the kind of the end. So I'm Andrew Kirsch, and we don't often think of Canada as having spies. We call intelligence officers. The Americans have the CIA, they have Homeland, they have Jason Bourne, they have a book every other day. The Brits have James Bond, and the closest we have here is that RCMP, I think Mountie from the 90s sitcom Due South, which, is a pretty dated reference of anybody, all the young people on here. But, even though we don't have the Hollywood cachet, we do have an intelligence service that does important work, for whatever safety or security that we enjoy in Canada. It's not an accident. It's not guaranteed to continue. It's because there are people that get up every day in the intelligence, law enforcement, military, and private security community that do what they can to keep it that way. And CSIS, Canadian Security Intelligence Service, our domestic intelligence service, is one of those organizations that people don't know a lot about. So I said I worked there for just under a decade. I wrote a book about my experience called I Was Never Here. It's available wherever you get your books. And I, speak and talk to issues of national security. Since I've been public, I get a lot of people reaching out to me who want to learn more about what CSIS is, what it's like to work there, and just more about kind of Canada's national security writ large. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. We're going to talk about kind of what CSIS is, what it does, what it's like to work there, and why I think it's important that more people know about it. And also give some, things to consider if you are interested in a career in national security or with our domestic intelligence service. I should say off the top, I'm not an HR. This is not a human resources event. I just speak from my own experience. So kind of take that what you will. Some things I can comment on, but I don't have explicit answers if you have specific human resources questions about the organization. But yeah, what is CSIS? What does it do? To answer that question, let me take you back to how I came to join the organization. I was a senior in university at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, on September 11th, 2001, when the terrorist attacks happened in New York. And that was, for those who remember, traumatic experience. Unlike anything we'd ever experienced, especially as a young person in North America. I graduated from university. I moved to London, England to work in finance, and I was living and working in London on July 7th, 2005, when the bomb attacks happened in the UK. And for those who remember, these were not isolated incidents. This was really an age of terrorism. There was a Spanish train derailment, 2003. There was the Bataclan hostage taking, Saudi barracks bombings. These were happening, kind of terrorist attacks were happening in major cities. Canadian troops getting ready to be deployed to Afghanistan. And as I was working in finance, I had kind of, one eye on the financial pages and the other eye on current events, what was happening in the world. And that's when I first, I wish there was a cool story. Like I wish that I was recruited at a graduate school. I wish that somebody had thrown a pillowcase over my head and thrown me in the back of an SUV and that I had this neat story, but I don't. I Googled, how do I become a Canadian spy? And, that wasn't even my first Google. It was, does Canada even have spies? I had no frame of reference. It's not something that, as I said, we know a lot about. So I learned about CSIS, and this is what I learned. CSIS, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, was created in 1984. It's a relatively young service after a royal commission following the FLQ crisis in Quebec. So previously, the RCMP was responsible for intelligence and law enforcement, and they were found to have, charitably overstepped during the FLQ crisis in the 70s. And there was a royal commission, and it was determined that we should, Canada, separate our intelligence gathering from our law enforcement, that there was a difference. And so they created a domestic intelligence service. So now most people think, oh, when I say CSIS, they go, oh, you guys are like the CIA. Well, not exactly. The CIA is a foreign intelligence service that operates abroad, right? And so people think, oh, you must be, like the FBI. So, well, no, the FBI is kind of a law enforcement body. They can bring charges. The FBI can investigate and bring charges against people. They more closely align to the RCMP. CSIS is unique. We're a domestic intelligence service. We're closer aligned with the British model, which is the BSIS and the BSS, the MI6 and MI5. Israel has the Mossad and the Shin Bet. Australia has ASIO and ASIS. But we're unique that we only have one. We don't have a foreign service, foreign human service, just a domestic one. So anyone who thinks that, oh, we must, but you must be super covert about it, we don't. We punch above our weight. We're very good at what we do, but it's limited. The mandate is very important to collect, analyze, and advise government on threats to the security of Canada, right? And there are 4 threats, and that's it. And I'm going to tell you that if you are interested in a career at CSIS, you're going to be memorizing these things. You're going to be studying these things. So it's 4 threats. They are espionage and sabotage, foreign influenced activities, terrorism, and subversion. And that's it. No money laundering, no fraud. I often knocked on a door and said, hi, I'm Andrew. I'm here from CSIS. And people say, oh, my neighbor's committing fraud. And I'd say, well, that's not me. You got to call the police. You got to call the police for that. So we are collecting, analyzing, advising government on threats to the security of Canada, operating largely within Canada. There's a limited ability to work abroad, but we have to collect largely on threats that are domestic. I didn't know any of this. I went through recruitment. I talk about it in my book. And for those who are interested and they don't pick up a copy, if you haven't picked up a copy, if you want to email me, I'll send you sample chapters of recruitment about what kind of that was like. But it really was, no surprises. Learning the mandate, being able to explain to the recruiters your understanding of what CSIS does, what kind of threats the CSIS investigates, and how they fit in the national security infrastructure. Who are the partners? Who do you work with? And what are the kind of specific threats that you would fall within that mandate? You have to learn French. For anybody, I know that was a question as well. So I went through 15 months of recruitment and then 9 months of French language training. And you have to pass a French test before you are allowed to go into your intelligence officer training class. I did 9 months of French language training and then 6 months of intelligence officer training. And this has changed now, I believe, but back then it was kind of a 6-month course. And you are learning in that course how to be an intelligence officer. And so this is another question I got is, what does an intelligence officer do? And there are 2 roles, though, in Canada. We are largely generalists. So an IO, intelligence officer, like myself, has to be able to do 2 roles. One is an analyst. An analyst is somebody who is overseeing a national security investigation, is receiving information from field investigators, open source information, partners, all sorts of intel that comes in, processing that to look for any information gaps, threats, and then tasking collectors to go and find additional information while they own this investigation. And on the other side is the collectors, and those are the people who are tasked by the analyst to go knock on doors. And I was an analyst in Ottawa for 2 years. It can be a tough post. I was sitting in a windowless office. We joked that we would get a poster of a window to put it up in our office, maybe get a plant, but we didn't want anyone to think that we want to stick around for very long. it's a challenge. That's part of it too, is doing that desk work, doing that analytic work. And you have to be able to do both. Even for a field investigator and a collector, if you can be great at knocking on doors and talking to people and get them to talk to you and give you information, if you can't articulate into your report what that person said, why it's relevant, what the information is, that's not a useful report. So if you're interested, you have to be able to do both. You have to be able to ingest, look at, read lots of information, to critically think about what are the important things, like what are the facts, what do we know, what's the analysis, what do we think we know from all this information, and then what can we do to turn that kind of analysis into facts? What information is missing that we need to make more conclusive inferences? And then from the collector side, it's when you're talking to people, how are we gathering that information and reporting that back? And I'll talk more about my career as an investigator. I was paroled. I joke I was paroled after 2 years in Ottawa as an analyst, and released back to Toronto region to be a collector. So if you think about the time frame, so I joined in 2006. 2006 was Toronto 18 case. And as I said, we're really worried about people blowing things up in our, our cities. 2010, 2011, Iraq and Syria start to kind of disintegrate a little bit. And a new threat arises, which is foreign fighters. And you see this in the news now with people who have gone overseas to fight, who are trying to come back. And the fear was we were going to have Canadians going to go overseas and get involved in foreign conflicts and cause death and destruction overseas, which is terrible. And we were worried they also would maybe come back with a network of support, training, motivation, and to come back and bring that knowledge and experience and carry out attacks here. So this was the concern, as I'm back in Toronto, and my task was to gather information on these types of threats, foreign fighter threats. And it's, a really, as much as I say, analyst life, you're kind of stuck behind a computer sometimes writing. It's a weird existence being a field investigator, especially I was living 20 minutes from where I lived and grew up, right? And I am knocking on doors, and we're not a clandestine service. I have a badge that has my name and an alias on it, but it says Andrew, my picture at CSIS, and it said, my name is Andrew. I'm here from the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, and I need your help with a national security investigation. And I'm talking to community leaders, people who might have information in their communities on threats, or people who I believe may be, associated with these threat-related activities. And I'm telling them my name and where I work and what I'm interested in. Meanwhile, at the same time, I'm lying to every single person I know about where I work and what I do. And it's a very odd existence to try to build relationships of trust and instant rapport with complete strangers who are tangentially involved in the activities you're investigating, while you are keeping from your closest friends and family what you're doing every day. And when I first signed up, and I'll tell this to people who are interested, I thought, well, at some point they'll tell me what to tell people, right? Like, of course, I'm just applying to CSIS. They're not going to, they won't tell me now. And then I went through recruitment, and I was hired. And I thought, well, sure, they won't tell me just yet because I haven't been trained yet, or haven't been French training yet. I said, I got to wait. And then I went through training, and then I said, well, maybe when I get to be a field investigator and get to my region, they'll tell me what to tell people. And a lot of it is discretion. It is what you're kind of comfortable with, and there's at least I didn't have a conclusive moment where it was like, here's your we're not a covert organization. I don't say I worked for the Ministry of whatever. I have to say, I was telling friends and family I work for the government and trying to change the subject. And I was going online and trying to online date and on JDate and tell people, I'm Andrew, and I work for the government, and I'm really get awkward when people ask me what I do every day. Uh, it is something that, we think about these careers and how fun they are, and they are. There's always, give and take, things that have to manage. That was a challenge for me. I don't know if I ever really figured it out. So, why is it important that anyone knows anything about CSIS, or anything about this? Well, the reality is that we do rely on people on the community to help. If you watch the movies, you see the movies. We'll talk about what movies get wrong. This idea that you put a picture into a screen, and their face is scanned and everything shows up about them and their criminal record and all their known associates. Like, no, it doesn't exist, or at least it wasn't when I was there. We are going out, knocking on doors, and asking people for help. It is much more interpersonal, as far as, do you know this person? Are they okay? What can you tell me? Do you know anyone who's a problem? Who should I look into? And we rely on the community in a way that we just need to build these relationships of trust. And it's great if people help us, and no one knows anything about us. So you're constantly knocking on a door and trying to explain, I'm here, I'm from CSIS, I am who I say I am, and you can trust me. And what happens, unfortunately, is if the only times that people see or hear about CSIS, which is typically the case in the news when something goes wrong, that can really erode that trust. I was at home one day, and I got a call from my brother, and he said, Andrew, I'm watching the news, and I see this guy that CSIS has found a threat to national security, and that he's going to be deported. And he's on the news here, and he's crying, and his wife is crying, and I feel bad, like that he's going through this. And he's like, should I feel bad? And I said, brother, well, I can't tell you intimate details about the case, but I do know the Supreme Court upheld this deportation, and you don't have to take my word for it. You can, take the Supreme Court's word for it that everything was done properly, and this is okay. He hung up the phone, and I thought, this is my brother. Like, this is somebody who, like, I was his best man. He was my best man. I think he likes me, and believes that I wouldn't join an organization or be a part of an organization that would, target innocent people and do bad things for no good reason. But he felt the need to pick up the phone and talk to me about it. And I thought, how many people are watching this show that don't have somebody that they can call? And what's that doing to the trust and confidence in our organization? So the third reason it's important you know more about CSIS, that people know about CSIS, is because we get complacent in Canada. And it's a sad thing to say, but the further away we are from an incident, the more complacent we get. The best time to knock on doors is when something bad happened, and you can tell people, look, I need your help because we're worried about X, Y, and Z. And sometimes I hear this stat that you're more likely to die of getting hit by lightning than be killed in a terrorist attack in North America. And that, some variation on that stat, and that very well may be true. But every day there are thousands of people who get up to try to keep you safe. And sometimes the fact that we live in a safe place is not, an evidence that we don't need security, but that our security is working okay. And we need you to continue to help and keep it that way. I tell my wife a good day is, as an investigator, is going out and knocking on a door and finding somebody who had information on threats and was willing to talk to you about it. Sometimes you get people who don't have information and want to chat, and people who have information that don't. And you're constantly going out to try to find that magical formula. Well, an unbelievable day is if somebody would call in, say, I'm familiar with CSIS, I know what you guys are looking at, and I think I can help. We'll know the more we can get to that point. A quick thought on surveillance. Got a lot of questions about surveillance. Surveillance are a support unit. So one of the ways that we gather information on people, we can knock on doors and we talk to the community, but also if somebody reaches a threshold of investigation, you can get surveillance, which is a dedicated team of people as a support unit who will follow somebody around. And extremely helpful to get pattern of life, their activities, who they may be meeting with, what they may be doing. I'll talk in a minute about our technical surveillance, which is putting tracking devices. But it's one thing if you see the guy's car parked in a parking lot, and you want to know, well, did he go in to get a coffee, or did he use a payphone to make a phone call when he's got a cell phone on him? And their surveillance can get close enough to kind of see, oh, okay, what are they doing? Is there anything out of the ordinary? Are there things that we should be concerned about? And that day can be long. It can be extremely quiet for long stretches, and then all of a sudden, kind of a frenetic and unpredictable pace. So, it is different from an intelligence officer. It's in a sense that an IO can be an analyst, can be a field investigator, knock on doors, make their own schedule. Surveillance work as a team. They just do surveillance, and that is kind of the role that they do. It requires training and skill and experience and coordination to work amongst your teams. It's really neat. It was something I enjoyed doing a ride along, but not something that I kind of would have done day to day. But that's just me. For some people, they love it. They really love it. I'll move quickly to my career special operations. I talk about in the book. When a subject investigation reaches a threshold of investigation, they can be targeted by a technical surveillance team that will go and plant listening devices or get access to their emails. And it's made up of technical specialists, remote and close access remote specialists, and a guy who we call locks, and he just picks locks. And all day long, if we have to go somewhere that has a door that has a lock, we ask locks, and he'll pick it. And then around that technical team is a security officer, an intelligence officer who provides security for that team. It's like I say, it's like a race car pit crew, where my job is either to bring the techs to the car to do their work, to focus on their work, or to bring the car to them, or to take them to the car and provide a secure area where they can do their work undisturbed. Not always like the movies and James Bond and Q. Our devices don't always work as they're intended. You can have a bug with a battery that you think is going to last 3 months, and it's a cold winter and it lasts a week. And that's annoying. You can have an implant that you think is going to, put it on a computer, and then there's a patch, a security patch from the software, and you lose it. It is a constant battle of devices that are fit for purpose, and creating a scenario by which you can put a team of 5, 10, whatever into a home office driveway to plant a device and do it undetected. It is a lot of unique and fun challenges. Talk about those in the book, and I'm happy to talk more about it. I'll just give kind of 2 stories, one that's in the book and one that's not. I say, in our first, you get trained, special training to be an IO and to be in special operations. And the grizzled veteran of training says to us, we're not going to plant any tricks, traps, booby traps, or anything like that to trip you up, to try to trip you up. We know that life will do all that to you and for you. And when it happens, we don't want you to think that it was us that did it. We all thought, sure. And sure enough, our first training exercise, we're all in a van, we have our dark hoodies, we're getting ready to break into a condo, and we're just in an above ground parking lot behind the building. We take 2 steps out of the van, first person goes, second person goes, steps in a huge pile of dog poop. And they could not have placed this poop there if they had tried. But of course, you can't break into a condo with dog poop all over your shoe. That will leave a smell, that will leave a mark. So everyone back in the van, and look around, make sure no one saw us, make a new plan. And I'll tell the quick story. It's not in the book, we were doing an install on in an office, a corner office. We're planting a device in the wall, and when you're in special operations, my job was to secure the people. I had gotten access to this office between 6 p.m. and we thought the cleaners were coming in around 4 in the morning. We want to be out of there by 3. So once the team is in and working away, my job is really to keep time, make sure we can get out in time, make sure we're not disturbed, and then be a final quality control check to make sure that we left everything exactly as it was. I was never here. We were never here. So we're packing up around 2:30, trying to get out. I say, hey guys, how's it going? Everything looks good. There's no dust on the ground, desk back to normal. We go turn the lights back on, and lights don't go back on. Guys, we all agreed that the lights were off when we got here. Yeah, okay, well, this is the problem. I tease the techs a lot, but in these serious moments, these are serious moments. So the tech goes, give me 1 minute, goes to check a few things. He comes back and I say, look, how long is it going to take us to pull all of our gear out of the wall and get out of here and patch it up so we were never here? If this target, the person of interest, was suspicious, and every day they leave their lights on when they go home, and the next day they come in, their lights are off, that would make them more suspicious. Or if they call an electrician, the electrician goes in the wall and starts to track wires, say, this looks weird, it's a huge problem. So the tech said to me, Andrew, this is not us. I think that these lights are kind of time activated, motion censored. They will go on in the morning. This is why, X, Y, and Z. And if not, in the super odd chance that the lights broke the night that we were here, if an electrician goes in and try to fix them, they will not find our stuff. And this is why. These operations to make these decisions. And so I said, okay, we're going to leave our stuff. I go home and I try to sleep. You never get any sleep after these things. And we send a surveillant by the next morning to see. Thankfully, mercifully, the lights, time sensitive, motion activated, are back on, and we're okay. And the reason I tell this story, is for a couple reasons. One is that, this difference between these intrusive, close access operations and remote access. And I do other talks about cybersecurity, but the main point of the cybersecurity conversation is, we're not trying to send big teams of 10 into places anymore. There's a real risk of getting caught. I can have cover stories, talk about cover stories and lying, things like that. But if I'm holding somebody's wall and there's a device in there and the cleaners walk in, there's a real risk, despite my best cover story, that the lack of plausible deniability. So, cyber is leveraging technology in place. It is the act of doing the same, conducting the same threats remotely, and using internet-connected devices, devices we have on us at all times, like phones, as ways to get access to people. And I do a lot of talks on cybersecurity, but for the purpose of this and the advice I give to people who are interested in a career, we can no longer say, well, I'm a Luddite and I don't know anything about tech. Tech, being able to understand it, you don't have to be technically, on the keyboard, but to be able to understand the pervasiveness in all of our lives, where that creates vulnerability for us, where we can use this kind of remote access, the information that's collected about us, where we can leverage that, where we can use that in our investigations. It is no longer just the techs do that and the IOs do this. And I'll give you an example. When I would go knock on a door as a field investigator, you'd try and get as much information as you could about the people who you are going to knock on the door. You want to know, do they have threat-related information, and would they be willing to talk to me, and how can I approach them? And back then, we were, do a Google search. I might hope that they were. There's an article about them in the paper, that they, were in a Rotary Club. Information about people was limited. Now, you can see, where they work and everyone they work with on LinkedIn. If they're liking their neighbor's Facebook photos to see how close they are, every thought they've ever had in their life is on Twitter. You can build pretty comprehensive profiles of people that, we are interested in. Now, on the cyber side, the bad guys can do this too. That's why we're all kind of vulnerable. But when you go knock on a door, when you are trying to figure out how to fill information, you're going to need to understand this, environment. And I'll tell you a story, once again, not in the book. I was trying to track down somebody that I thought was tangentially, related to Al Qaeda, and that I didn't know how supportive they were. I didn't know how involved they were, but I had information to suggest that this person, was close, and I needed to figure out how. So I found his ex-wife, and pardon me, and I found his ex-wife, and I thought, this is great. The ex-wife, they're split up, so she might be willing to talk to me. She might not be as protective of her ex-husband. This is a great person to go and knock on the door and talk to. Grab my stuff, I go, I knock on the door. I say, hello, my name is Andrew. I'm here from CSIS. I have some questions of national security. Can I have a moment of your time? She says, of course. She says, come on in. And she, she sits down. I sit down. Her ex-husband sits down. And I think, okay, couldn't have gotten a Facebook status update there. I'm going to have to figure out a whole other set of questions I'm going to be asking her about in the presence of the guy that I wanted to talk to her about. This is to not put yourself in these types of positions is extremely helpful. I'll tell you another one, a little funny story. We were going to talk to somebody who, by nature of their business, we thought they had information that could help us. Went online and found this person was a furry in the furry community. And I don't know if anyone knows anything about the furry community. And I say, no judgments either way, right? People who dress up in animal costumes, and it's pretty benign. Go to events and meet other animals, and it's kind of a neat little community. So at least I knew that when I went to knock on a door, because if I had not, and I went in this person's place, it might have been surprising to see the tributes all around to this person's animal of choice. That might have been a little disarming and disorienting a bit. So at the very least, you kind of know a little bit more information about what you're walking into, how to build rapport, make sure you're not surprised. So I say the IOs of the future. This is not, you're not going to lock up someone and say, hey, can you give me a profile of this person? And you will need to be able to do this stuff. You'll need to be able to interpret what it means. You'll need to be able to understand how to use it. And super, super important, and a big change from when I was there. On the technology side too, if you think about the special operations, I talk about in the book, we were doing operations in people's driveways, like in their cars, in front of their houses. I mean, this was before every single person had a Ring doorbell camera. I can't imagine doing something like that now, where you're just setting off Ring doorbell alerts as you're walking down the street at 2 in the morning, whatever it is. It's a new kind of world out there. And to understand where you are creating, where you are popping up on the radar, where you're creating vulnerabilities, and where the other vulnerabilities are, super, super important for the new IOs to know. So I'll kind of wrap up by saying, I tell the light story, and then I'll have room for questions. I tell the light story because one of the reasons I left, it's a fun career, and people say, did the job change? The job didn't change. I changed. I signed up. I was 25, 26, single. I moved back from London. They said, "Do you want to move to Ottawa?" Of course. "Do you want to work in this office and lie to everyone you know?" No problem. Happy to be a part of it. Proud to be a part of it. And I got married and had a kid, and I wanted a bit of more control of my life back. I didn't want to lie to everybody. Toughest part, I'll say this too. It's not fun to lie to people what you do or be discreet. But when you tell people the truth, then you ask them to lie for you. And so there's a bit of protecting people from that you have to do to not put them in an awkward position, right? So you say, "Well, I'll just tell everybody." Well, okay, but then what do you tell them? Well, I tell them, I say, "You don't tell anybody else." Don't tell anybody else is a lot. It's a lot to ask. So I, want to settle in Toronto. Didn't want to move back to Ottawa. My French was getting very, very rusty, but I was proud of what I did. I'm proud of the work that we did. I would do it again. I would do it better because now I know, but I would do it again. I recommend it. It's a neat career. It's one of those ones where I would constantly say to myself, especially in special operations, if I was doing this anywhere else, it'd be illegal, and I can't believe I get to do this. It's kind of fun. So I decided it was time to leave, and I consult. And if you receive this email, and I think you'll end up on my mailing list. And we will. I do threat risk assessments, bug sweeps. I used to break into places, and now we keep people out. And I wrote a book. And if you've read it, and if you give me a like or a review on Amazon, that would be extremely helpful. And I talk, and I'm happy to answer questions because, as I said, it's an organization not people know a lot about. I think it's to the organization's detriment, and I encourage people who are interested in it as a career to check it out. I found it rewarding, fun, strange, challenging, and anyway. So yeah, I'll open it up. If there are questions in the chat, if not, I'm happy to opine on other subjects. But I want to leave some time for other folks to have things if I covered or didn't cover. Sorry if that was.
So we do have a question from
Yep.
T. Matthews asking, what are your arguments for and against Canada needing and eventually setting up a foreign intelligence agency?
Yeah, it's a great question. So our mandate, the CSIS mandate, is broad. It's pretty broad that it allows us to collect information abroad as it relates to threats to Canada. So you can do some things abroad, and I have to be careful to make the distinction that CSIS is a domestic human intelligence service. We do have a foreign collection, a foreign a technical service. The CSE is able to do things abroad and has a mandate to operate abroad on the technical side. My fear is that, or my concern is that we should have a very clear understanding of what we want, what we feel we're lacking as far as information or intelligence that we would want to set up a foreign intelligence service to do. So, for example, foreign intelligence services can go and snoop on foreign countries for inside information on trade negotiations, or that your government can then use and leverage. Like, do we want to get in that business? Are we thinking about being offensive? Are we thinking about do we have the stomach for that? Are there things that we feel that we are not getting now that we would like to get? I don't know. So setting up a service for the sake of setting up a service, I think we have enough powers now to protect ourselves. If we want to be a player and go out and do some foreign collection, I think we need to have a real conversation about what we're going to send people out there to do, and are we comfortable with that? So, one argument is, and it's a fair argument, that because we don't have one, that we are very reliant on our partners in the Five Eyes community to provide us information. You know what? By size and scope and scale, we'll probably always be very reliant on our American partners, British partners. But I think we have to be very, very clear about yeah, how comfortable we are operating abroad against what countries and what risks we're prepared to stomach, and do we have geez, do we have a foreign policy objectives, clear-cut foreign policy objectives that a foreign service would be mandated to help collect on? Because ultimately that's what it's all about. CSIS is mandated to collect on domestic threats. What are the foreign service goals that we would want a foreign service to go and help further? I don't know. I don't know what those are. I can look in. Any other?
None
Yeah.
from the chat, but we do
Oh,
have
I
some that
see
were
another.
asked.
Oh, I got another one here.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's questions kind of about. I mean, yeah, I left CSIS doesn't mean about my own goals, and it's interesting. Maybe I'll do a broader than just me. I'm contrary to the fact that I wrote a book and do these things. I'm kind of a shy, introverted person, but there it used to be you did a CSIS career, you did 30 years, you retired, and you got a good pension, and that was your career. And maybe you do a little consulting, but ultimately, you do your 30 years. And more people are leaving earlier. I think that whether it's generationally or whatever the reason, I think CSIS is seeing that people are doing a 10, 15-year career. Before you get 25 years and you're counted down to the pension, folks are leaving. But just because we leave, just because I left doesn't mean that I don't want to continue to serve or don't care or that it's not important to me. So, my consulting business really is trying to bring the skills and experience that I developed to help governments, companies, private individuals protect themselves from the vulnerabilities that I used to exploit, that I know that other threat actors are exploiting to protect themselves and still be a part of the community. Other CSIS people recently, a lot of universities are setting up, research security departments. A lot of my colleagues have gone, or ex-colleagues have gone to join universities to be a part of their research security teams. I was in the Office of Provincial Security Advisor, providing advice to the provincial government for a while. So, I like doing this under my banner, and I've greatly enjoyed the experience. And I hope to continue to serve and do interesting projects and help people. As I said, with my unique skills and experience, I like to call it. I see, I see some other questions in here. Interoperability. What do you see here, Stuart? Skills. Oh, skills undervalued. Most work at CSIS. Utilize or value the most working at CSIS that we could start developing now. Okay. Here, skills CSIS you can start working on now. So one is absolutely you're kind of being able to synthesize information for executive leadership to be able to really, CSIS what's so important for it's being be clear and concise and not just in your I have analysts that I work with now, and I see a question about subcontractors. I absolutely work with subcontractors, people interested in getting involved. And I'm like, you cannot make a statement of fact without facting under it. Like, what do we know? Oh, we know this. Well, how do we know this? Well, we know this because of this, right? Otherwise, it's analysis. We think this, and thinking things is fine, but you have to be very, very clear about what we know, and we know this because of this. We know this because someone said this, and then someone else said it too, and we have to make sure that those people didn't from each other, right? So being able to write and do it concisely and be able to separate kind of fact from analysis, and that's on the kind of the analyst side, and people love that. That's also can be a great career. And I don't mean to speak ill of analysts. I was an analyst, and that has its fun and its interesting side. And then the field investigator, which can be incredibly stressful. I mean, knocking on doors and trying to find out, you never know who's on the other side of that door. You're trying to build relationships of trust. And people say, well, I guess you got good at lying, and I guess you got good at, no. what you have to be authentic, because one thing I learned on that side is that um, people pick up on authenticity. You have to be yourself. Otherwise, they might, what's going on here? There's like, is there a hidden motive? Is there something that's not telling me? It seems like something's off. People are incredibly intuitive in ways that I didn't realize until I started doing this job. And because sometimes I had to ask people for strange things. When I was special operations, we were borrowing stuff. Every car job that we did, we had to go and get a survey vehicle, something to practice on, something for the techs to practice on. And I would go to people and say, I need to borrow your car. And I can't tell you, to a dealership, I can't to borrow your car in this lot that you're selling. And I'm from CSIS, but I can't tell you what I'm going to do with it. I promise to bring it back. I'm not going to give you any money. I'm not going to leave you any paperwork. You can't tell anybody that I was here and that I took this car. And, the dealer would be like, man, I'm going to give you this car, but if you're lying to me, I'm going to be so mad at you. Like, because he knew, and even though the request was silly and the amount of information that I could give him was, I would say, I really need your help. This is important. The reason I can't tell you is X, Y, and Z. Like, I can't tell you this, but I can tell you that it's a national security investigation, and these are things that I can't tell you, and this is why you can't tell anybody, and blah, blah. And, they could pick up on that. So I would say, how do you work on that? I don't know if you work on that. I think maybe dispel the one way to work on it is get rid of ego and, be your authentic self and ask for help and be comfortable doing that. I don't know if that answers the question, but I found that worked for me. And yeah, what else? I have to recruit applicants for years degree. Oh, you know what? The university degree is an interesting question, and something I've commented on. Right now, CSIS requires a university degree for the intelligence officers, I think for analysts and for surveillance. And I've argued publicly that I think they should do away with it. They should do away with that requirement. People have taken different career paths. I know personally folks who have gone and joined the military and done a lengthy military career but didn't get a university degree that might not qualify, or folks that went right to work for a variety of reasons that have extensive experience in corporate security, knowledge, skills, language capabilities that would make them excellent surveillance, excellent intelligence officers. And I would tell whoever listens to this that we are not lowering our bar by widening the number of people that can apply. I think we're limiting ourselves if we do not allow a number of applicants and then judge them on their skills and experience, right? On travel, on language, on being able to be adaptable, to communicate and interact with cultures that are not your own. Unfortunately, that is not the case right now. And unfortunately, you need to have a degree for certain roles at CSIS, and they are inflexible on that, or at least to my knowledge, have been. I know there was debate recently about the police services, and the police services are going to do away with university degree. I think that's great. I don't think that anything in my university degree prepared me in a way that someone else's who didn't have one, like it is a whole other career. I think universities are great. They teach you how to think critically. They teach you how to write and all these things. But if you can develop those skills outside of a university and you can demonstrate them, then, you can demonstrate them. And that's what it's about. I see an interoperability question. I think it's a good question. So I know, Stuart, maybe you'll grab the next couple from me. So yeah, interoperability is huge. And another reason why it's important, I think people know about CSIS and often called kind of a black hole. CSIS and the RCP, everyone have different mandates. And CSIS can collect information on reason to suspect, right? And the RCMP is reason to believe. So when you have a lower threshold to start your investigation, you can obviously start sooner in many cases, in which case we are collecting and building our case and have a bit of a head start. which is an advantage of having a different mandate allows. The RCMP have a higher threshold to commence an investigation, which means sometimes they are delayed. And, there are reasons for that. The RCMP are collecting evidence to bring trials. CSIS is collecting information that they're going to process to intelligence. And go talk to Professor Stephanie Carvin, I have great respect for, about intelligence to evidence and books that have been written. So the interoperability can be a challenge to deconflict, to sit down at a table and say, like, this is what we can tell you, that we're allowed to tell you. And if we told you this, it's going to poison your investigation and get in trouble. So the RCMP doesn't love that. With D&D, I think it's public that CSIS operated in Afghanistan. I had colleagues who were over there that were supporting D&D in that mission, and were also supported by D&D, obviously, to get around and to conduct some operations over there. So, absolutely, there is some collaboration, and CSIS is works for the government. So CSIS is how they have people who are out going to different government departments and saying, what is of interest for you? What type of information would you like for your decision making? You collect, analyze, and advise government. Well, you want to advise government on the information that they're interested in. So they're absolutely working closely with levels of government to provide timely and relevant information to them, and working with other government departments and agencies to do so. So there's a lot, and CSC, local police. I've had a local police called on me, so there was a little collaboration. I say, guys, don't arrest me. Here's my badge. I'm with CSIS. That stuff happens. But yeah, is there anything else there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've got a question from James Forrest asking, why do you think a variety of federal ministers have chosen to ignore warnings from CSIS pertaining to activities of foreign state actors?
That is a great question, and I don't want to get too political, but I can tell you that it's incredibly frustrating to CSIS. They're the collectors and advisors, and the government decides, right? And I'm on the ground having a coffee in a Tim Hortons all over the city and writing my report and sending it up and hoping that the analysts put that together and everyone packages it all up nicely, and it goes to a decision maker and they say, hey, this is the problem and we should do X, Y, and Z about it. I didn't work the foreign interference file much. I kind of supported it a bit when I was in special operations because we were a service branch. But that's a core part of the mandate, and I know people who are out there working that investigation. And my heart breaks to think that they're sending these reports up, they're doing all this work, and people are saying, no, we didn't read that, or we didn't get that. And I ultimately believe that it is the politicians, who are in charge, or the ministers who are in charge. If they're not receiving information, if they're not getting briefed in the manner or the way that they want, that's on them. And if they told CSIS, guys, I don't want to get an email, I want to get a verbal brief, CSIS would run over there, right? Like they would provide the information. In whatever manner that the minister requests, because we're a service branch. So it is very frustrating to think that all that information that's being collected and advice that's being given is either being ignored or not listened to. And I don't think that I don't have access to my email address or email is a legitimate excuse for why they didn't receive it. So yeah, why do I think? It's easier to not know. Sometimes things, you have to do something with it. I don't think it's a great excuse or a great reason. And I can't speak for why that is. All I can speak is the frustration of hearing that and thinking, what are we doing here, guys? You run for office to be a decision maker, and you have to make tough decisions for sure. But then stand behind them. I did read it, and we're going to do X or Y. But the I didn't read it, I don't think is okay. I don't think that's okay. Any other, we have a few minutes left, Stuart. Any other
Yeah, we've got
questions?
one
Oh,
that was
perfect.
asked beforehand.
Okay.
What opportunities are there for ex-CSIS officers?
You're kind of out and you're out. Um, they say once a spy, always a spy, but we're all trying to figure out the ex folks like myself, and I have many colleagues who I've connected with who have left at different ages and stages and generation, and people go all different directions. Many colleagues work for banks, they work for financial institutions, they work for I said universities, some consult, some retire and retire. There's no one kind of path. There's a few of us that are like myself who started up our own, consultancies, and I have some runway left, and so I'm, trying to grow and build my business. But there's no kind of one-stop shop. Now we all remain happy and available to assist. Obviously the government called me and said, Andrew, we need your help. Of course, they haven't. I don't know if they will, but just because we left doesn't mean we still don't want to serve and don't care about, what we were doing. So, yeah, we'll get maybe one more question, and I think I said maybe we'll do this. Maybe we'll do this again, just in a couple months. Any other? We'll do one more. You got a good one?
I'm looking to pick the best one right now. Actually, I like Jake G's question. Is there any literature that you recommend to develop skills for a career in CSIS?
Here's I don't want to say the funny part. You're expected as an IO to be a generalist, right? So the joke that was always when you're an intelligence officer was don't read the book until you're sitting on the desk, which means don't fancy yourself. I'm definitely going to work the Russia file and become a Russia expert because they're definitely going to put me on the Russia desk, right? It doesn't work that way. I was a financial guy. I worked for a bank, and I had a financial services background. And I said, hey, I'm here, and I'm able to work in the financial unit. And they say, that's great. No, thanks. Go work in the policy side. And I have colleagues who are, have certain skills and knowledge of an area, and they worked it for a little bit, but then they work somewhere else. So I would say I wouldn't focus on a specific area, or don't say, I'm definitely going to be the expert on, unless you want to be an analyst in that space. Don't focus on one specific knowledge expert on an area. There's some. I think the Carvin books, and she's written a bunch with Thomas Juneau, and there's some others. But what is CSIS like? Let me tell you, there's no there's little surprises, but there's no real big surprises. They're going to ask you about the organization. Every organization has a mandate, what they're mandated to do, and what you want to understand is what is the organization mandated to do, and how does my role that I'm applying for fit in to that organization? Well, CSIS is mandated to collect, analyze, advise government on threats. And when I was an IO, I was a collector. So I am collecting, and then, I'm analyzing. And so you understand, oh, this is where this role fits in. So I would, I don't know if you can see it behind me as a leather-bound copy of the CSIS mandate. And they give this to you when you graduate your spy training, and you have your own copy of the mandate, and you don't have to memorize the whole thing, and that's not the expectation, but to certainly understand it, to understand the core activities, the powers and the limitations. That's what you want to kind of understand, because also every organization is different. So you might think, oh, I definitely want to work for CSIS, but I love money laundering. I love money laundering. I love anti-money laundering. So maybe FinTrack, maybe I should have gotten FinTrack. I don't know. But you would say, well, I really want to travel, and I want to, work abroad. Well, CSIS is a domestic intelligence service. The most exciting place I made it to was Windsor, right? And I love Windsor, but that was it for me. So maybe GAC, maybe being in the military, kind of understanding exactly what the organization does and what your role would be, how it contributes to that mandate. And then for others too, that's kind of the most helpful thing to wrap your head around, because they're going to ask you about that. Your first question on your first interview: what is this? What does CSIS do? And have a good answer. I hope this helps. So maybe that's a great note to end on. I hope this helps. I wrote a book. Feel free to pick it up. If you just want recruitment chapters, I'm happy to send those out. And I said, we're on YouTube. I try to use some YouTube videos on CSIS stuff, and LinkedIn, and reach out and connect. And I want to show my best. If you're interested in that, it means you're interested in national security and getting involved. Please do. Please do. So until next time, stay tuned. And yes, I'll say stay safe. Stay safe, everyone. Thanks so much.